Welcome back to TarHeelIllustrated.com, or if you're watching on our YouTube channel, Tar Heel Illustrated. I'm THI staff writer Jacob Turner, and joining me, as he always does, THI publisher Andrew Jones. And Andrew, we're here for part 2 of our fall look-ahead series, and as you guys can tell by the title, going to be focusing on Carolina's defense in this one. But before we dive into it, make sure you guys head on over to TarHeelIllustrated.com after this video is over, of course, and sign up for our premium message boards if you haven't already for $8.33 a month. Let me say this, it's a great time to do it with the offseason coming up, especially. There's going to be a ton of football recruiting and basketball recruiting stuff going on, and 99% of the recruiting stuff that we report goes in our boards. A lot of stuff doesn't make the front page. So if you want to check stuff and kind of see what's going on behind the scenes, see what names are being tossed around, other things that are going on, make sure you guys head on over there and sign up for just $8.33 a month. I'm on the boards. AJ's on the boards a ton. Football recruiting analyst and Dina King is over there. Basketball recruiting analyst David Sisk, who's actually up in Indianapolis this weekend right now. So it's a great time to be a part of our community, and especially ahead of the season as well, because we go where the Tar Heels go. But
my wife thinks I'm on the boards too much. Just to throw that in there.
Hey, well, if you guys want to talk to AJ, you guys know what to do. Go and head over to TarHeelIllustrated.com and sign up for that for just $8.33 a month. It's a great opportunity and not a better time to do it, in my opinion. So definitely go do that after this video is done. But AJ, let's dive into the defense. We'll kind of dive into the specific position groups like we did in our offensive look ahead video, which if you haven't seen, make sure you guys go check that one out after this one. But kind of overall takeaways about the defense, and kind of how are you feeling about it from the 3 open practices we saw, which also 2 open scrimmages and the spring game? What are kind of your overall takeaways from that?
Deeper and faster and higher ceiling.
Yep. Video over. So we can end it right there.
Yeah. In 48 exclamation marks. They're so much deeper than 2 years ago. They're so much faster than 3, 4, 5 years ago. Their ceiling is considerably higher. What I think is interesting, we talked about this in the video we did on the field after the spring game, is that a lot of their more talented kids are the least experienced ones. So they have an interesting combination of older guys who experienced, they're smart, they're trustworthy, but these younger guys who are going to push them a little bit, because when you look at a Power Eccles or someone like that, it's like, yeah, you got to get them on. It's kind of like Tony Grimes last year.
Yeah, so you got to play him
out, but it's like you got to get them on the field, and so it's going to be a balancing act that the coaching staff's going to have to do in order to keep a lot of guys happy, the older guys happy, to keep them totally zeroed in, and also get the young guys the necessary kind of experience their games can grow. And if they're able to do that, I mean, they could have 30 defensive players by late November that throw in there for a series. The coaches aren't going to be terrified. That's how much they've grown on that side of the ball. And honestly, Jacob, we know what the stated mission of this program is. We know what their goals are. You can score 1,000 points. And I know you got to score these days in college football. Max talked about it a lot, especially over spring practice, that you've got to stop people. Defense, the old adage, offense puts people in the seats, defense wins championships.
Yeah.
Offense wins championships now too, but you've got to be good defensively. You don't have to be great if you've got a loaded offense, but you have to be good, and you have to have moments of greatness. You've got to be great in the red zone at times. You've got to be able to cause some turnovers, and if the defense is okay up front, but you can flip the field with some turnovers every once in a while, you take a lot of pressure off that defense to constantly have to get conventional stops. So I think they're trending in that direction. I think that the way they can scheme, now that they have a lot of linemen up front, and they're going to be fresh up front, they might be able to generate more of a traditional pass rush from the linemen up front. It means that Jay Bateman can reach a little bit deeper into his bag of tricks, and he can pull out some more unique stuff that people haven't seen yet, and they could scheme more creatively, and they don't have to give up their nickel or give up a safety or a corner in order to blitz, or give up one of the linebackers in order to get pressure on the quarterback. They're dropping those guys, and they're getting pressure up front. You're going to see more turnovers. So you're going to see a defense, I think, that does more of that. They're going to do more fun things. Remember Storm Duck's pick 6 in the Military Bowl a couple years ago? I think you're going to see more of that. So an offense that's going to be potent may get some help, because it may get shorter distances to the goal line, and it may get a defense that actually scores some points for them this year. That's how you become a championship contender. You've got to be able to click in all phases of the game, and all phases of the game have to be able to put you in position to score points. I think we'll see a little bit more of that from the defense this year.
A lot of dudes on that defense, AJ.
Dudes everywhere. They should have a little D on their helmet. The only thing is,
yeah,
the anti-Duke sentiment, Tar Heel Nation probably wouldn't like that.
Good point. That probably
just have
slide.
a different logo for D. Just dudes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, let's
they should have
some
shirts
made.
they all wear on defense. A light blue shirt with white says dudes.
And next time we talk to Jay Bateman, we'll pitch that idea to him and see how he feels about it, right? So we'll see how it goes.
Because of that, they won't do it.
Yeah, exactly. They'll be like, no, definitely not. But let's dive into the kind of the first position group that I want to talk about on that with the defensive line. I think we kind of know what the starting group's going to be based on what we've seen throughout the spring and also kind of what Mac Brown and Jay Bateman's told us a little bit as well is they're going to see Tamon Fox's. They're kind of been playing 3 down linemen. Let me say that first, and really only 1 hybrid. That's kind of the scheme that we've been seeing them play the most during the spring. So I think Tamon Fox is the guy that is going to probably start at that hybrid position, but don't forget you got guys like Tyrone Hopper behind him, Chris Collins, some other guys in that room as well. So I think that's a relatively Des Evans. Can't even forget about him. We'll
get the hybrid in. We'll get the hybrid. I don't like to call those guys defensive linemen.
It's a good point. It's a good point.
And I know we had this back and forth with Jay about what they're really called. I mean, it's a defensive end. It's an outside linebacker. Some guys are a little bit more suited for the OLB part. Some
still trying to figure out.
And then there's guys like Kamen Rucker we got to throw in there who can do that. He can also line up with a hand on the ground. So, and I think we'll see that. I think we'll see him line up as a DE with a hand on the ground, upright, all kinds of stuff. But you're right about the interior of the defensive line.
Let's talk about the hybrids then first, and then we'll talk about the rest of the 3, the kind of D linemen, if you will. Mentioned Tamon Fox is probably the guy that's going to start if you're starting 1 hybrid. You've also got guys like Tyrone Hopper, who's been a part of the program for a long time, kind of after battling some injuries and other things. It kind of showed glimpses of what his ceiling can be last season. I think that's the reason he ultimately decided to come back, is just trying to be a little bit more consistent as he looks to go to the next level and kind of work on some of the things that he heard he needs to work on to go to the next level and play in the NFL. So, I mean, those 2 guys right there just bring a ton of experience. Then, like I mentioned, Chris Collins, I think, is a guy who's showed improvements, definitely looks like a guy that can play the position with how big he is, and has also showed some glimpses in the scrimmages and practices that we've been able to watch, and even made a few plays in the spring game as well. And then Des Evans, I mean, how could I forget about him? I thought he was one of the standouts, from the spring game, in my opinion. I thought he made some really nice plays, and also heard from a few Carolina fans on Twitter and that I talked to that seemed to be pretty impressed with him after the spring game as well. And he's a guy that's continuing to mature, learn the playbook, and he's definitely gotten a lot stronger as well. So I think overall, I'm sure there's some guys I'm probably missing down there that can slide in there, but overall, I think just with those 4 guys at that position, I think you're pretty set and feeling pretty good about that, especially when you got 2 experienced guys like Fox and Hopper kind of leading the way.
Well, I'm sure the coaching staff will be relieved to know that people on Twitter are pleased with what they saw at the spring.
Yeah, I know, right? I'm sure they're sweating bullets over that.
Don't forget about Kamen Rucker, right? Kamen Rucker.
Yeah, Rucker as well.
Standing player. And, he might be the best of that group. It's just depending on how they're going to use him. And I do think that now that we're seeing the hybrid position sort of take the form perhaps that Jay Bateman envisioned from the beginning, you got guys that can do multiple things, and Kamen Rucker personifies a multiple. He can, like I said, he could put a hand on the ground, he could fight off an offensive tackle, make a play, and he could cover someone downfield. In fact, Jeremiah Gimmel told us last week, we were talking about Kamen Rucker, he described a play in practice that it was a ball that went 30 yard pass that went 30 yards downfield, and he turned around and Rucker was in coverage.
Yeah.
So I think Rucker has NFL talent, and I think he's got NFL smarts. He's a very, very smart guy. And I think he's someone that Carolina fans need to keep an eye on. He's a football player who could do multiple things, and he's a guy that you got to have on the field in some capacity. I love what we saw from Desmond Evans on Saturday in the spring game. All the things that we didn't see last year when he was on the field, and people thought, okay, well, will he have this, or will that be a part of his game? Where is he going with his game? We saw all those questions answered this spring. We've only seen him a couple of times because he missed one of the spring practices we were at, but he showed it Saturday in the spring game.
Definitely,
physical, bigger. He's moving. He's an unbelievable athlete. He's a basketball player. He's just one of those guys that just so long. He's got leverage. He uses his hands. He's gotten strong, so he's better using his hands. He's got more strength. and the quickness and speeds there. And there was one play where he made, I can't remember who he tackled, but he stood over him and looked down at him. And I'm telling you, man, I love stuff like that. I don't
me
like
too, yeah.
crossing the line with stuff, but I think before crossing the line, there's some stuff that's allowed, and it should be encouraged because you want guys to have that mojo. You want them to exude some moxie on there. And I thought we saw that a little bit from Dez, which means he's getting comfortable with what he's doing. His confidence is going up. And just think about 4 months from now, a little over 4 months from now, when they go to Lane Stadium, if you've got Desmond Evans who's confident and he's got all those natural gifts, and you got Rucker who's confident, he's got all those natural gifts. Wow. And then you throw in the Tamon Fox element. You throw in the Tyron Hopper element. You throw in Chris Collins, who's a guy that's got some similar type traits to Evans, just maybe a little bit on a lesser scale. And suddenly that room is in fantastic shape, really good shape. They could play two at a time. They could play one. I think we're going to talk about nickel a little bit, but I think it's interesting how they can use that extra spot. We'll call the nickel the 11th spot out there because a lot of people don't really understand what nickel is. And you can use a third linebacker, middle linebacker out there, a guy like Khadry Jackson, or you could throw a rah-rah in that spot, or you can use an additional one of these hybrid guys or whatever it is. I think that they can do a lot of interesting things because of the athletic ability that guys like Rucker and Des Evans bring to that room. And then you've got the stability of Tamon and the emerging stability that Hopper should be able to give you. And I say emerging because even though he's been around the program for a while, he's missed a lot of time with injuries and other reasons. So he doesn't have, 2,000 snaps under his belt, but he's got enough experience and enough knowledge that he's a guy that certainly makes that room stronger.
Yeah, it's a talented room. And like I kind of mentioned earlier, when you've just got experienced guys that have played, especially in a guy like Tamon Fox, that helps in terms of bringing the younger guys along. And it definitely helped this spring because Tamon was a guy that kind of was able to step back, and Hopper did it as well, and let some of the younger guys take reps, which can definitely help bring them along a little bit quicker. So yeah, I think you're set in that position, and you definitely got a lot of options with the likes of Rucker, Fox, Hopper, and some of the Evans and Chris Collins, like we mentioned as well. So yeah, let's talk about the defensive line, if you will. I mentioned it earlier, but it looks like Ray Vahasek, Miles Murphy, Kevin Hester are kind of going to be the three guys starting down there along Tamon Fox at the edge. But this is another group, and we've talked a lot about the defensive line this spring. And kind of our biggest kind of takeaway, our biggest thing about them is there's a lot of dudes down there. There's a lot of talent down there. But what's the high end of this group? How good can this group really be? And I think there's some uncertainty, at least from us. And are they going to be great this year? I don't know if they can get up to that, but I think the high end can be good to above average for sure. And I think it's definitely going to be improved from what we saw last season and definitely the year before that. So a lot of bodies. You got, Tamari Fox, we haven't talked about, has missed the spring. Claude Pender's another guy down there. Christian Varn, just so many options down there at that defensive line. And overall, I think for us, it's just about how good can this group be, and can some of these younger guys improve and play significant minutes and get better from some of the limited reps that they saw last season, especially towards the end of the year. Because after that Wake Forest game, which we've talked about so many times last season, once Jay Baton and Mac Brown were like, you know what, let's roll out some of these younger guys and see what happens. The defense certainly improved after that. So I think for this line, it's just about what kind of production can you get from the starters, and how does some of the depth and the other guys come along and fall and going into the season as well.
Well, yeah, we've talked a lot about, not on camera. I've told you guys for a few weeks now, man, I really like the numbers they have there. But the concern that you have to have is, you could only play 3 down linemen at a time. You're not going to run any more than that out there. That's not what the scheme is or anything like that. Sometimes there's only 2 down linemen out there.
Yeah.
But I think we saw a lot more 3 hands on the ground stuff this spring. And if they could get a traditional pass rush from those guys, we're going to see a lot of that moving forward, which is why we had the questions about the use of the hybrid and how many they'll have on the field at one time sometimes. But they're really deep. They could go 6, 7, 8 deep. You're like, wow, that's the 8th guy on the defensive line. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
There's a lot of young talent. Keyshawn Silver, we didn't see him do a ton this spring. We saw him out there, but he was battling through an ankle injury. So we don't really know what the real Keyshawn looks like. And he'll be even better once they get to fall camp in August.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the whole thing is regardless of whatever 3 they put out there, where is the high end for that group? I think what's more impressive for the defensive line is their depth. And the number of guys they can use that will keep them fresher. Because of that, I think the defensive front will be better. They gave up a lot of points, a lot of drives, long drives late in the first half last year for points.
Mm-hmm.
I wrote a piece about it about 3 weeks after the season ended, and it's pretty alarming what they did. And they were tired. And Bateman said, "We were tired." Max said, "We were tired." Well, they shouldn't be as tired, because all tired affects you the most up front.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if guys aren't doing their job up front, it affects everything else. Okay. And then what about the Notre Dame game? What about the Texas A&M game? What did they do in the fourth quarter? They ran right at Carolina. Carolina's front was tired. So they're going to be better just by virtue of having more depth, because they're going to be fresher. They're going to have fresh guys at the line of scrimmage all the time now. So that's taken care of. But what's the high end? And if they go up against a team like A&M again, and they're intent on running the ball and they get in the red zone, will they be good enough up front with what they have in the roster to stop that in December of 2021? I don't know. They're going to be a lot better, and they have a ton of depth. And in a couple of years, some of these guys, maybe by the end of next year, maybe by 2022, the Murphys and the Ritzies and those guys, they could have a really good defensive line.
Mm-hmm.
The ceiling will be way up here. I just don't know where the ceiling is at any one time for this group. But they are going to be better, and they have some star potential. Miles Murphy could end up being an NFL guy. Jahvaree Ritzie absolutely reeks of future NFL guy. There's no doubt about it.
Mm-hmm.
Kevin Hester was 3 years ago, he put on a football helmet for the first time in his life. He was a basketball player. He was a second-team All-Met basketball player in Atlanta, and he decided to go out. They had spring football in Georgia. 5 practices into his spring football career, he already had 2 offers. He had an offer from Boston College.
Because an athlete.
You look at him and you're like, wow. Now imagine weight and conditioning for football. Imagine a blank canvas like that and teaching him technique and fundamentals and all that kind of stuff. And he's got that footwork. And we saw some of it in the spring game and some of the practices we went to. You know, the trajectory is like this for him. It's not like that. He's going like that. He's passing guys by. And then you throw in Tamari Fox, who's played a lot of football, is very good, also a really smart guy. And we already talked a little bit about Vahasek. Mac loves Vahasek. He says Vahasek has had a great spring. Yeah. And he's the guy that they could trust. You could go on and on and on and list a bunch of names of guys and players that they like. But you know what did Mac say? The ultimate key is they got to find 6 guys that can rush the passer also, because there's so much passing that goes on now. So I think they have their 6. I did ask him after the spring game if they have their 6. I think he pretty confidently said we've got 6.
Yeah.
They can get to 7 and 8, maybe 9. I don't know if they can get to 9, but they have some other guys that can certainly stop the run, and that will get on the field and run situation. So that's a very long answer to your question about the defensive line, because I do think it's an involved situation. I don't think you're just going to run guys out there and they're going to be awesome right out of the gate. I think it's going to take some time for this group to grow and for us to figure out where their ceiling is as a unit for 2021.
Yeah, agreed. It's long answer, but it's a long list of guys in that position group. So
it is. And we're going to spend a lot of time writing about these guys, talking about them when we're at practice in the fall. We're going to have eyeballs on the defensive line almost all the time.
Definitely. Yeah,
it's
an interesting one. Mm-hmm.
It's intriguing. I mean, I love watching Jahvaree Ritzie do drills.
Yeah, he's fun to watch.
Yeah, I got a football crush on him already. He's only had 15 practices.
I think I might too, man. He's an impressive kid, and he's really good. Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of people watching this video who are Carolina fans are going to feel the same way about 3 or 4 games into the season. He's going to play. He'll play maybe quite a bit.
I agree. I think he definitely looks the part. Let's talk about, I'm going to group the linebackers and nickel just for time purposes kind of together. Obviously, I'm saying this as well because I think you might see some interchangeable movement in between these 2 position groups with some guys in the linebacker room maybe going to play at the nickel position. So I think it's pretty obvious that the 2 starters are Jeremiah Gimlin and Eugene Asante. I don't think anybody's really going to argue that. But looking at the depth in that position group now, which I don't think this team really had over the past 2 seasons, you got Cedric Gray, Khadry Jackson, and then we got the 2 freshmen in Power Eccles and Ra Dilworth, who, by the way, really, really stood out and impressed me playing together, especially in the spring game on Saturday. So I think that group, when you've got a guy like Gimel out there that's just so important to what this defense does, the leader out there, not only leader on the defense, but just the leader on this team, and the quarterback of the defense is Mac Brown and Jay Bateman like to call him. got to be feeling pretty good about that. And Eugene Asante, a guy that's just so fast sideline to sideline, proved that he can play at this level in the Orange Bowl, and some other glimpses of the past few seasons, also an important special teams member as well. So I think at that position, starting wise, you're feeling pretty good. And we'll kind of talk about the depth here in a little bit, but that's definitely a deep position group as well. And then the nickel position has been one that we've really been watching hard over the past couple weeks, especially in some of the open practices we were at, because it's been kind of an evolving, rotating door of trying new guys and seeing how this works and whatnot. It looks like, for what we've seen in the spring game and towards the end of spring practice, that Don Chapman might end up being the starter down there, the guy who started at safety a ton over the past 2 seasons. I think they like what he can do down there, his physicality, his size, his athleticism, his ability to cover as well, and also do some things and going and blitzing the quarterback and getting to the line of scrimmage. That's something that's kind of emerged recently, but from talking off camera to you and what we've seen, it kind of looks like he might be the guy who steps in and starts in Blacksburg against the Hokies when the season starts. But you also got options behind him. Welton Spotsville, a guy that moved from wide receiver to the defensive side of the ball, and has looked really impressive. A super big kid as well. And you got DeAndre Boykins in there as well, who might see some reps. And I've also seen Jaquarius Conley play there a little bit. We'll kind of talk about him a little bit later when we talk about some of the DBs. But overall, I think at the nickel and at the linebacker position, you got to be feeling pretty good about it. I think it's just, do they end up rotating at the linebacker position? We haven't seen them really do that over the past 2 seasons with Gemmel and Surratt. They rarely came out of the game. So do we see a similar thing to where Gemmel and Asante played 99% of the snaps during games, or do they look to rotate a little bit more? It's going to be interesting to see how that plays along. But overall, I mean, starting wise, feeling pretty good about it if you're Jay Bateman, I think.
Well, Jay Bateman has said a couple times, especially leading up to the Orange Bowl last year, when he was reminded that last August, he kept talking up Asante. Well, Eugene,
and they never saw him.
He's going to get on the field. Now, he started the Virginia Tech game at sort of like a pseudo nickel, if you will.
Yeah.
And he got a few reps, but not that much. He didn't play nearly as much as we thought he would. And then he basically said, look, if you've got Jeremiah Gemmel and Chad Surratt in the field, you don't want to take them out. I think they're going to be the same way with Gemmel and Asante.
I think so too.
Did you see the 2 sacks he had in a 3-snap stretch Saturday?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he just darted through one of the
impressive.
gaps.
Mm-hmm.
Got through the gaps, and if they were allowed to hit quarterbacks, there would have been an ambulance on the field, because you have I say that as a joke, obviously.
Yeah, no, for sure.
He's really impressive, and he's super smart. We saw Chaz learn how to play the position in front of our eyes, and there were times where he would read wrong, he'd break wrong, he'd guess wrong, whatever the case is. Asante been playing linebacker for years, and he's got a lot of that down. So I'm not saying he's going to be better than Chaz, but he does certainly. I think he can give them a tandem to the level that Chaz and Gemmel were, because I think Gemmel's going to be better. I think Mac told us last week that Gemmel's an NFL guy. That's what he called him, direct coach. He's an NFL guy. Mm-hmm. So again, we talked about NFL dudes on offense. There's NFL guys on defense too. So does Khadry Jackson get on the field much? Does Cedric Gray get on the field much? What do they do with Ra-Ra and Power? I think Ra-Ra and Power are just going to develop. They got plenty of time to help out and play a lot. There's going to be a spot open after Gemmel graduates and moves on. So there's going to be playing time for those guys down the road. And I think we're going to see Ra-Ra a ton on special teams. I think it'd be kind of neat to see him in that nickel role a little bit. I think that would be kind of cool. But they probably are just going to have him focus on linebacker right now. There might be some tweaking with nickel, like we talked about, because I think that they have to get really solidified with Don Chapman. Mac told us after the spring game, and I can't remember the exact quote. I have it written down over here, but I'm not going to look. But he basically said, we feel pretty good right now. He said, look, we've had Conley working solely at safety, Chapman for a couple of weeks at nickel. We like where we are with that right now. But I don't think that the flag has been planted in the soil on that. I do think that there might be opportunity for still some movement, be it Chapman either to further solidify, or maybe he needs to further solidify in the fall, or something else. But I do think that they're going to end up probably with Chapman as the guy, and Conley's going to stay at safety. I think they're actually better at safety with Conley back there. And Chapman had a couple of sacks last year. He's shown us a little physical side to his game.
Definitely physical.
So I think maybe he fits that. And he's going to have 3 months before fall camp starts to learn more about how to play nickel, to watch a ton of film. He's a really smart guy. So when he comes in fall camp, he'll be a better nickel just having gone through the player-led practices and just learning more about the position. As far as depth there goes, spots will look bigger. Remember, he came in as wide receiver, as you noted, and he made some physical plays in the spring game. He got a little bit of time last year. They had questions at nickel. That's one of the reasons why Asante started the Virginia Tech game. Because Conley was thrown to the Wolves a little early and it didn't really work out too well. Then he got banged up. So I think nickel is still a position that we'll pay a lot of attention to in the fall camp. I think it's still a little bit in flux. It'd be really interesting to see what DeAndre Boykins looks like when he shows up in the fall. He certainly is someone that's got talent. I'm not sure he looked ready in spring yet, but maybe he will look ready in the fall. That's a beautiful thing about enrolling early and getting 15 practices to make a crap load of mistakes, because you get it on film, you get coached up, you know what you need to do during the 3 months between spring practice and fall camp, and we'll see what he shows up. So they're in really good shape at linebacker. I think they'll be in good shape at nickel, but I think, as you said, that's an evolving situation right now. It's a little bit fluid still.
Yeah, and keep this in mind about Don Chapman too, which we talked to him a couple of weeks ago after open practice, and he flat out came out and said, I've really never played the nickel position before. I think it was the third open practice we went to, which was about a week before the spring game. I think it was that Saturday before. He kind of came out and said, yeah, this is kind of my first time doing it. So I played a little bit of corner, but I haven't really, played this position a lot. And the fact that he, I thought he looked good in the spring game playing it. So give him a few more months and then give him, some time in fall camp. And I think you'll definitely see him emerge as somebody that can really shine at that position.
And he said he likes it.
Yeah, he said he enjoys it. Yeah.
He volunteered it. And he volunteered and says he likes it. So I think because he likes it, he'll learn it quicker. Some guys get moved in positions. They don't like it.
Yeah, they don't want to play
I've talked to defensive linemen who were moved to the offensive line. They want to get a little bit more athletic ability at tackle or something like that. They can't stand it because they want to make tackles and they want to hear their name on the PA system. Nobody ever asks a tackle on the PA system.
Exactly.
So some guys don't like position changes. It appears, and I don't have any reason to doubt what he said, that he likes this. So because of that, he'll develop quicker. He'll fully embrace it.
Yeah, and he said really the only main thing that he had to kind of learn was blitzing and going after the quarterback. He said he did a little bit at safety, but it's not something that's really a big part of his game. And obviously that's something that nickels do quite a lot. So that he said that was kind of the biggest thing he had to adjust to. Yeah, it's different.
Angles are different, covering bigger guys sometimes, tight ends and stuff like that. So I think he'll be fine. It's going to be interesting to watch that position in the fall, though, and early in the season, and see what they do with it. If there is a group in the secondary, or there's a group on the defense, like I said, that's going to be fluid for a while, or could be fluid, that is the one that could be fluid in that sense, where they don't really know exactly what they're going to do with it. Although right now, if you told me I had to make a bet, I would place my bet pretty firmly on Don Chapman securing that job and doing a pretty good job.
I would agree. Let's move on to the defensive backs. I'll kind of keep the safeties and corners group together as well. Let's start with the cornerback position. It's an interesting one because it's just so talented. We think, and I think the consensus will be that Tony Grimes and Storm Duck are the starters. Now, I think there's a little bit of a conversation to be had in terms of McMichael and Duck potentially. I don't see any way that Grimes doesn't start based on what we saw from him last season, just the hype around him right now. I think he's just too good to keep off the field. But the Duck and McMichael situation in particular, I think, is an interesting one. Storm Duck kind of missed a majority of spring practice, didn't play in the spring game with somewhat of an injury. We haven't really got a ton of information on that quite yet, but obviously with a guy who got hurt last year as well. So could still be kind of recovering from that and trying to get back to 100%. But when you've got three guys, Tony Grimes, Storm Duck, Kyler McMichael, let's say Kyler McMichael's your third guy. That's about as good as it can get in the cornerback room. So definitely a good problem to have in terms of, okay, do you go with Duck? Do you go with McMichael? How does that kind of rotation end up kind of fixing out and working out? But I think Duck right now and Grimes seem to be the two guys I would expect to start come the season. And then at the safety position, this is also a position group that's kind of changed because of Don Chapman moving to that nickel. Trey Morrison and Jaquarius Conley, I think. I mean, Morrison was a guy who moved back there last season and played well at times. And then Jaquarius Conley is a guy who played predominantly at nickel last season. But I think this coaching staff, based on what you said a few minutes ago as well, think they kind of like him back there at safety. And I think and like Max said, I think it's going pretty well so far. So, but when you've got like guys like Gio Biggers, who I think is pushing him, you've got guys like Cam Kelly, who played a lot last season. Consistency has kind of been his biggest issue. It's just these two position groups in the defensive back room as a whole is just incredibly deep. And I didn't even mention the likes of Dede Hollins and Obi Igbona in the cornerback room behind those three guys. So overall, it's going to be interesting to see how kind of the starting groups work out. If Conley slides into that starting safety, if Storm Duck or Carla McMichael ends up starting at that other cornerback. But like we kind of talked about with the quarterback position and the running back position in our offensive one, it's a good problem to have, having so many talented guys in there, just trying to figure out who steps out first on game day.
Mac has told us multiple times that when healthy, Storm Duck is an NFL player.
Mm-hmm.
So if healthy, Storm Duck's going to be one of those corners.
Mm-hmm.
And Tony Grimes is a future NFL player as well, and he's going to be the other one. So I'm going to assume that Storm Duck will be fully ready to go. I mean, he did practice tonight, did do stuff. He wasn't even in uniform Saturday. He was wearing his jersey and sweatpants and stuff. But if he's fully ready to go, which I'm going to assume that he will be, then you've got two lockdown NFL caliber corners. And then a guy like Khadry McMichael, he was a number 53 player nationally in the whole class of 2018. He's got a national championship ring. He had some very, very good moments last year and then some not so good moments, but he's got high end talent. So for him to be the third guy who I think can play both corners, he's going to see the field a lot too. They're going to give guys breaks because they want a fresh team in the fourth quarter. Yeah. So he will factor into it. Big fan of Dede Hollins. I think that he's very, very liked on that team. He's a kid that each of the last 2 years was kind of thrown into it in the middle of the season. Did pretty well and gained a lot of respect over there. But if you go to the safety, Jay Bateman told us last year when he was talking about the nickel spot and some of the freshmen, he said that they think eventually Conley's a safety. Mm-hmm. But he had to play nickel because somebody had to play nickel. Nickel's kind of been a tough spot for them to find the right piece to slide into that slot overall. Because it was Trey Morrison last year before Miles Woolfolk became ineligible. And then they had to move Morrison back to safety, and they slid Conley in there. So now we're going to get a chance to see Conley play safety. He's pretty much only worked at safety in the spring. I think he's there now. I think he's a safety. What was interesting in the spring game, he wasn't out there with the ones or the twos. It was the third shift that went in where he played. But he's got a lot to learn. He's got a lot to earn. And he's such a good football player. And he's another guy that's just a football player. I think he'll be out there. I do think Morrison and Conley ultimately will be the starters. But, man, you got to like what you saw from Gio Biggers.
Definitely.
Bigger, strong, pop Caleb Hood, a play we talked about in the offense video, and you mentioned something about it before we started shooting this
huge
video.
Hit. Yeah, huge hit.
Yeah, and Caleb hit him back. It was great. Both guys kind of won that battle.
Yeah.
And the first thing we saw when we saw 27 out there, the first practice they let us into, which was the third practice, and they were finally in pads, boy, 27 looks big.
Mm-hmm.
Looks bigger.
He does. He does.
You know, if you were to walk up to the linebackers, you could almost not tell the difference. Certainly with Rah-Rah, he's bigger than Rah-Rah. But I think they're in good shape there. We said a lot. They're in good shape because it's a repeated thing because they've done such a good job recruiting multiple kids to slide into every spot that they have on the 11-man on both sides. And I do think that a guy like Biggers is part of that. It'll be interesting to see what they do with Cameron Roseman Sinclair. It'll be interesting to see if we get a chance to see much of Dontavius Nash next season.
Yeah.
Certainly, they have a couple.
Cam Kelly as well. Knock my computer. Cam Kelly as well is a guy that
I'll get back to Kelly in a second.
Mm-hmm.
But they have a couple of games next year where they should win by large margins. So we should get a chance to see some of these kids play and see kind of where they're at as far as development goes. And Kelly's kind of an X factor back there. Bateman told us a couple of weeks ago, look, when he plays really well, he's phenomenal. But he's sort of a feast or famine player. He's either at this level or he's down here at this level. And as you mentioned, he's got to be more consistent. Mm-hmm. Consistency is the key with him. And he could be that third safety that kind of can play both, gets on the field quite a bit. But he's going to be competing with Biggers. It's interesting. It's kind of interesting to see a guy like him who's a big-time four-star kid in high school. When he came to Carolina, if you remember, he transferred and he was waiting to hear from the NCAA whether they were going to say he could play right away. They finally gave him approval. And everybody thought, well, that is a nice pickup for Carolina because the week of the South Carolina game, the opener, suddenly another piece became eligible to play. and then he got hurt. He started the Clemson game and got hurt, and it took a while for him to get over that. But he's another guy that a lot of teams will just pencil him in. There's a starter right there.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But this is a different animal at North Carolina. They got dudes everywhere. So it'll be really, really interesting to see where Cam Kelly is in the pecking order when they get toward the end of August. They're in good shape everywhere, Jacob.
They are.
Even at nickel, you know, I think Chapman could be pretty good there. I don't know yet about Spotsville. I think Boykins down the road might be the answer there. Maybe he's a guy, the first guy they've really recruited to nickel. And he was a big-time running back, but he told them he wanted to play defense, and they said, okay, you're a nickel. So a lot of times they've brought guys in, they played him at nickel, but maybe they didn't bring him in as a nickel. Maybe DeAndre Boykins is the first guy they really brought in as a nickel.
Yeah.
If that's the case, we could see him sooner rather than later.
You may see, we talked a little bit off camera, maybe you see maybe like a Cedric Gray take reps there, you know, backup linebacker. Maybe he gets a little chance.
It could be.
Depending on what they want to do. You know what I mean?
It could be. And I think if we see that, though, it may also tell us it's one of two things. Either there's linebackers, you just got to get those guys on the field somehow.
Yeah, too good. Yeah.
Or they're not too thrilled with what's going on at nickel.
Exactly. Yeah, that's kind of the fluid situation. And that's what one of the things we're going to be watching hard going into fall camp is how does that safety kind of position.
And I would think Khadry Jackson would slide.
Yeah. Cedric Gray,
snaps before Cedric Gray would. We saw practice a couple of years ago, Jackson working with the DBs. Working on coverage. I think he's more of a coverage guy. You got to be able to cover if you're going to play nickel.
Definitely.
He just looks like he fits the suit a little bit more than Cedric Gray does. That's also because I think I've seen more of Khadry Jackson than I have of Gray. So I might be wrong about that. I would have to see more of Cedric Gray to get a better, more established opinion of him. But Jackson, based on what I've seen so far, looks like if they had to do something like that, or if they chose to do something like that, he would be more likely to slide over there for a few reps.
Yeah, I would agree with that, AJ. I mean, I might have to trademark this quote, but a lot of dudes. I think that's the one quote you're going to be hearing from us for a long time with this team. Because there's
I've
just
been writing
a
the
ton
word
of
dudes a lot. People are going to think, man, this guy's from the 80s for sure.
This is a good way to put it, man. They just got a lot of dudes out there that can flat out play and that are talented. Obviously, there's a lot of guys that maybe have younger guys that haven't been thrown into the fire quite yet and proven they can do it, again, at Notre Dame yet, But overall, I think you've got a lot of guys on this team. And I think the future, not only this season, but moving forward, I think the future is really bright. And when you're returning all your starters on that side of the ball, besides Chaz Surratt, got to be feeling pretty good, especially when you look at how that defense came on towards the end of the season, and especially after that Wake Forest game, which we've talked about a ton. So, yeah, AJ, I think it's offense is looking good. I think the defense looks good as well. So it's going to be really interesting to see how this team continues to develop going into fall camp, see how rotations continue to shake out. See how, who slots in besides Morrison at safety or who slots in at that corner position and also on the D-line and hybrid. So and the nickel as well. Can't forget about that one. So just a ton of moving parts that we'll continue to have to cover throughout the offseason and going into fall camp as well. But I think it's a good place to wrap it up, AJ. This is part 2 of our fall look ahead series. I almost forgot the name for a second, but I recovered quickly on that one. So it's a good place to end this one and move on to the next. So I've been Jacob Turner. He's been Andrew Jones. Before we wrap this one up, make sure you guys click the description below, hit TarHeelIllustrated.com and head over there and sign up for just $8.33 a month. You've heard me say it a lot, but the off season is a great time to be on our boards, not only ahead of the season because we go where the Tar Heels go and we'll be at every single game, but also because of how much recruiting stuff will be going on throughout the summer. And you can only see a majority of that stuff if you're on our premium board. So definitely go sign up. As always, guys, like, share, subscribe. See you in the next one. Thanks.